Yeah, it's your boy Ray on the mic. Let's go.
Let's go ahead and jump into this. I will share my screen and we'll do this introduction that I'm excited for. Something that Margaret stated is that, the DEI field is difficult, is tough, is a lot going on in our world. And it could be really hard and taxing and tiring. And one thing that I'm doing a better job of is practicing what joy looks like and what resiliency looks like for me. And want to share that before we dive into this conversation with our panelists. So as the panelists know, when you introduce yourself, your picture will show up. I would like to say your name, what position you hold in the world, and describe the photo that gives you joy. So I'll go first. My name is Ray. Like as stated, I wear many hats in the IAC space. But my day gig is an IT supervisor at a local healthcare institution. But on the side, and mostly all the other things, which we'll talk about when it comes to how we come into our DEI field, is speaking, consulting, content creation, podcasting, as you can see, and ways in which to create inclusive communities where every identity belongs and thrives. And this photo gives me joy. This is my family here. My wife and 3 boys now, which is wild to think about, of 6, 4, and almost 8 weeks. And this is something that I look forward to every day, which probably will come through that door in a few moments. So that being said, let's move to the next person, Chantel.
Thank you, Ray, and thanks for having me today, everyone. My name's Chantel, and my pronouns are she, her. I am the Senior Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Manager at Convene, and something that brings me joy are sunsets, traveling in the beach. This photo in particular was from one of my trips to Curacao. It was a wonderful lobster dinner on the beach, and this photo is not edited in any type of way. That is what the sky looked like. So I'm really out here just chasing sunsets.
Oh, hashtag no filter. I think that's I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Abby.
Hi, everyone. I'm Abby Combs, the Inclusive Diversity Program Manager at Granite Construction. And these are my 2 little ones. So any moment that I'm not working, I am with my children. So I have a 4-month-old and an almost 18-month-old. So they keep me very, very busy.
Thanks, Abby. Appreciate you sharing that. Maddie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maddie Waldron. I'm a senior associate at Saramount EAB. And this is a travel picture like Chantel. I took this picture in Nice, France last year. I love traveling so much. I was in France for about 2 weeks last year, and it was amazing. So
sweet. Thank you for sharing that. And Michaela.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michaela Williams. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a DEI and mentoring consultant with ISG. And this is a photo. I was at a Jews of Color retreat in November. And I previously worked in the Jewish community as like a young professional. And I just really like being able to sort of get together with people who have sort of walked similar paths to me and sort of being able to relate in community like that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, I would encourage everybody in whatever space you are a part of that you are in, that you take the opportunity to ask those questions of what brings you joy, what brings other people joy, because this work can be hard. As I was reminded in another call or another conversation, I believe Martin Luther King, you might have to quote me on this, but Martin Luther King, in his biopsy, his heart was of an older individual, like an older person, like he died young, but his heart, his stress, everything that was bearing on his shoulders when it comes to caring for this work was beyond his current state of his years. So it's just like, hey, how do we take a step back and realize as people, as human beings, to take care of ourselves in this work? And it's important to do so along the way. But in this conversation, as we talk about what DEI looks like in our field, one of the first questions I would love to ask, and actually it came about in our pre-session of designing this, is that we all came into this work in non-traditional formats, right? It isn't like we just got out of school and immediately went to become DEI practitioners. There was some stretch of transition or unofficial work that occurred. So I would love for each person to share a bit about what was that journey, like a snippet or highlight of some of your journey to the work that you're doing today. And I see Michaela first, so we'll start with you.
Thank you. As I said, I previously worked in the Jewish community in like basically a community center for college campuses. And it was my very first job out of college, and I was a social justice coordinator. So my work kind of already overlapped based off of that interest. But I was just seeing things and experiencing things firsthand as one of the only Black people in most rooms, one of the only people of color in most rooms, and also as a woman. And so I think the sort of beginnings of my DEI journey just kind of organically came by just being who I am in the world, and noticing things that I viewed as unacceptable, and wanted to change. And yeah, I think that was sort of the start of it all for me. And that gave me the sort of passion to say, no, I want to do more of this. I don't want to just do this for me and myself. I want to do this for other people. And so that kind of springboarded my career into DEI.
Look, y'all, we've been in the pandemic or doing this thing for how long? And we still can't find the mute button. I'm so sorry. That's a terrible host on me. My bad. Abby, please go next.
No problem. So I have a hospitality degree, so no formal studying. It was always my goal to go into hotel management. And so out of college I did, and I worked in hospitality for 10 years and achieved a senior leadership role. I was a director at a local resort here in the town that I live. It's right on the beach, so I got to see some beautiful sunsets quite often. But then when the time came that I was ready to start my family, that really threw a wrench into working in the hospitality system, which is nights, days, weekends, long hours. And so I was looking for a change, while also going through a huge shift in my persona as well. So I came to Granite here and as an EA role, just to kind of find some sort of balance in a corporate position. And our VP of diversity and inclusion needed some help, and I was like drawn to. I felt like this is where I was meant to be. So that's kind of how I got here.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Let me make sure I'm not on mute. All right, cool. Thank you for sharing that. Chantel, you go next.
Of course. So similar to Abby, I also have a degree in hospitality and tourism management. I have a specialized focus in event management as well. So after graduating, I went into the hotel and events world for over a decade, which eventually led me up to Convene, which is events and meetings center outside of hotels. And from that, I really wanted to place the focus on helping people, just not for a one-time event where people are coming and going. Wanted to make that everlasting change. So I shifted that focus to focus more on our employees. And that's kind of how I got into DE&I work, starting off being an ERG lead, and then taking it upon myself to go to our leadership team saying, hey, we need this to be a real thing with a function, with a leader, and with resources. So that's how I got into this work.
Thank you. And Maddie.
Hi, everyone. So I was actually lucky enough to come into DEI while I was in college. But prior to that, I was coming into this work from politics. I'd been interning and working in local politics and public policy from the time I was in high school up until my sophomore year, when I realized I just didn't want to work in that space anymore. But I've always had a desire to be an advocate for people. And so I was talking to one of my college advisors about what I could possibly do for a career shift, and she actually recommended going into DEI. I don't know if anyone on the call is familiar with Northeastern, but we have a program called Co-op where we're able to take off 6 months from classes to do full-time work. And so that's how I got my introduction into DEI. I had my first co-op at TripAdvisor, where I was on the diversity and inclusion team. And I just really fell in love with the work while I was there. So I'm super grateful to have found this passion so early into my career.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. And I would hope that as we keep the conversation and continue the discussion, you will see parts and pieces that everybody's story and journey pulls into this work that informs them to do the work in their currently are, right? I got my degree in sociology and American ethnic studies, but the path that at least was created at that time in 2012 or whatever was like, all right, you could be a professor or a nonprofit executive or something of that nature, but didn't really get the sense of I think the DEI or like the chief diversity officer titles and roles wasn't as formed yet. Obviously until years later, where now it's one of the mainstays in a lot of executive rooms. And so while I kind of fumbled and stumbled my way to a lot of community work, found my way as an IT supervisor, and that team dynamic and team development in that way, and seeing people and helping them grow, we have to incorporate their identities as well and as a part of that journey too, and not turn a blind eye or have a colorblind perspective when there are identities that are representing into our spaces. And so I think because of that, and finding that that's not common in a lot of areas, not many folks have that lens, as we've seen in recent worldly news, being able to be one of those voices to help carry that forward, but not just talk about it from a pontification's perspective, but actually work with people and help integrate that as a part of the work. So that's kind of what I bring to the space too. But one of the main things is that I believe, and I don't want to assume, I'm a millennial. If you want to go around real quick and articulate what generation you're from.
Gen Z.
I'm that weird cusp that depending on which list you check, I'm either Gen Z or millennial. I think I'm more Gen Z though.
I'm a millennial. I also heard us referred to as the Spice Girls generation, so I will accept that as well.
Right. I'm also a millennial.
Yes. Good to hear. Yeah. My older brother-in-law, he's about to turn 40. I believe, and he was considered like a senior millennial. I called him that one day and he hated it. So I'm like, there it is. But the conversation we're bringing to the table is obviously how do we see this work through our lens? So I appreciate that we have a mixture of Gen Z and millennials to this work, but tell us a little bit from your perspective, and we'll go with Abby, you first, of just what does the difference look like, DEI between our millennial generation versus the other generations? How do you see any difference at all? Any perspective in that?
Oh yeah. I mean, even just talking about these topics to my parents, let alone the workplace, on how like even something like pronouns, I feel like my generation, it's not really a big deal to us if someone wants to be referred to by their pronouns or to be asked what mine are. I'm not offended by that in any sense, even though I feel that I present as female and it maybe could be apparent to someone, but I'm not offended, whereas someone I know or I have seen in a different generation might not appreciate that or understand. Like the use of they is very, can be clunky sometimes if you're not used to it. So some differences. I think the maybe openness is not as there to talk about something, but it's changing, I think. Understanding how to have the conversation.
Are there any other differences that you recognize too from the work that you are doing, or just?
I feel like the political landscape has really informed sort of like the conversations that I even will have with my own friends. I'll talk to my parents about it, where it's like, yeah, I wasn't necessarily, both my parents are biracial, and my dad's like, yeah, I don't know that I'd necessarily talk to my white friends about racism when I was growing up. Like, I don't know that that's a conversation that I would approach. Whereas for my generation, and at least the people that I'm surrounded by, it's pretty much expected. Like the fact that wouldn't come up in conversation at all with me and my white friends, or that, other kinds of forms of oppression wouldn't come up to have a conversation about identity. Is like a wild idea, I think, to my generation.
Yeah, and building off of that, social justice was such a big part of my coming of age online. And I'm sure a lot of millennials can relate to that too. It's just something that a lot of younger people are constantly thinking about in a way that older generations maybe haven't experienced just because it wasn't as accessible as it is now. Social justice literature and discourse wasn't really something that I had to seek out. It just came to me through Facebook or Tumblr or Twitter, whatever social media I was using. And because this work is so ingrained into who we are, I think that there's more of a sense of urgency in getting the work done with Gen Z and millennials. And that's why I think accountability and transparency are becoming more important than ever. Like, we want to see where your pledged dollars are actually going and how much progress you're making on your hiring and your retention and your board diversity and so on.
In which it brings me to think about, because I think what we talked a little bit, there's tension there, right? Of experiences that we are seeing, what we want to bring to the table, and the work that we're doing with, even within our own generation and other generations around us. So I'm intrigued to kind of know, like, how do you navigate that tension? What are some of the ways and tactics that you like reflect and express that within the work to keep the work going? Like, what does that look like for you?
I've been here. For me, I think it's about meeting people where they are. You really have to get to know the audience or the team members or the teams that you're working with, see where their knowledge is at, and kind of find that point of connection to call them in. And it's not like, hey, I'm telling you it's this or that. It's okay, I can see why you think this way. Like, here's some other examples of how you can expand your thinking.
Yeah, I think that's calling people in. I think, you mentioned that, like, rather than calling people out for what they said wrong, right? I think it relates into one of these questions we kind of got about, like, the patience for the slow pace. And there's, like, definitely some urgency with our generation. I feel, for me personally, sometimes, like, getting my head and heart aligned and knowing, like, maybe what I would do in my personal life and how I feel about things is not always the case of how my company is going to do and handle things. So having someone to talk through that with. So I feel that, me and my internal team here spend time, like, discussing, like, okay, how would we going to handle this? Like, when Roe v. Wade was rolled back, lots of companies put out statements. We had to discuss whether our company was. That's something that, as a woman, I resonate with, like, very strongly. But what is right for my company might not be what is right for me personally, which can be challenging sometimes. I have 3 younger sisters, but my youngest sister is definitely, like, feels that companies need to be aligned with her personal views. And that's, like, very strong that she feels, where they think I at least have a little bit more understanding that we're going through change management and that takes time.
Yeah, I think that ties to one of the statements in the chat of the biggest difference of that sense of urgency, of that expectation that things need to happen right away. So, which honestly, yes. I mean, my Twitter feed every second shows something new, right? And so that instant of, here's the news is happening, or actually, because I see it, definitely plays into my thought process, as you stated, Abby, of, all right, like, this just happened. We need to do something today, or we're going to be falling behind or whatnot, right? But that's not always the case, because there are multiple facets, especially in the organizational context, that we have to wheel through, and before we could just immediately make something happen today, right, or make a change. So I see, so folks are continuing to share or people reiterating what generations we're from, which is great. So I appreciate that.